Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. And today, we're tackling a topic that's beneath our feet, literally,
Yeah,
soil. I'm fascinated by how something we walk all over every day is so incredibly vital to life as we know it.
it really is amazing how much we depend on soil. And yet,
Yeah.
how little most people know about it.
It's true. You've given me a really interesting mix of sources this time around. We've got articles on DARPA's efforts to remediate contaminated soil, reports on the fertilizer crisis,
Yeah.
and even a stack of proclamations from mayors about saving our soil.
Yeah.
What sparked your interest in all this? Are you planting a garden? Are you worried about the future of food, or just curious about the ground beneath our feet?
I think it's a little bit of everything, honestly. I've always been fascinated by the natural world, and
Yeah.
lately I've been thinking a lot about how all these interconnected systems work. And soil just seems like this perfect example of something that's both essential and often overlooked.
I totally agree. So let's dive in. One thing that jumped out at me was the range of perspectives in these sources. We've got very scientific definitions of soil, 50% solids, 50% voids, these intricate structures. And then we jump right into discussions of food security and land degradation.
Yeah, it's interesting how soil bridges these seemingly separate worlds. You can't really talk about food security without understanding the science of soil health. And you can't talk about soil degradation without considering the social and political implications.
Right. So let's break it down a bit. Why does that 50-50 split of solids and voids even matter?
Well, it's not just about having enough space for air and water, it's about the structure that's created by those solids and voids. That structure affects everything from drainage and aeration to the activity of the soil food web.
Wait, hold on. Soil food web. That sounds like something out of a science fiction movie.
It might sound strange, but it's a real thing. It's basically a complex network of organisms, from microscopic bacteria and fungi to larger creatures like earthworms and nematodes, all interacting and depending on each other.
So it's like a whole ecosystem under our feet.
Exactly. And all of these organisms are essential for breaking down organic matter, cycling nutrients, and creating a healthy, fertile soil.
Wow. I'm starting to see why healthy soil is so important. But some of these sources paint a pretty bleak picture. That CFR report on the fertilizer dilemma really caught my eye. It basically says that we need fertilizer to feed the world's 8 billion people. But we're way too reliant on just a few producers, especially Russia.
That's a major concern. And the recent disruptions to global supply chains, first with the pandemic and then the war in Ukraine, really highlighted how vulnerable that makes us.
So fertilizer prices skyrocketed. What was the actual impact of that?
Well, it's not like we suddenly ran out of food,
Hmm.
but the effects rippled through the system. Reduced fertilizer use leads to lower crop yields, which drives up food prices and can even lead to shortages in some areas.
And I imagine that hits the most vulnerable populations the hardest.
Absolutely. The people who rely on subsistence farming or have limited access to resources, they're the ones who feel the impact most acutely.
So on the one hand, we have this essential resource that's under threat. And on the other, we have this amazing array of potential solutions, from high-tech interventions to global movements like Save Soil.
Mm.
What do you make of that contrast?
I think it speaks to the complexity of the challenge. There's no one-size-fits-all solution. We need a multi-pronged approach that addresses both the scientific and the social aspects of the problem.
Well, let's start with the high-tech stuff.
Yeah.
DARPA's CERES program, which uses engineered plants and microbes to remediate contaminated soil. Sounds straight out of a science fiction novel. Can plants really clean up explosives and jet fuel?
It might sound far-fetched, but the science is actually pretty fascinating. It all comes down to the rhizosphere.
The whatosphere.
Rhizosphere. It's the zone surrounding plant roots where plants and microbes interact. And by engineering specific plants and microbes, we can enhance their natural ability to break down contaminants.
So it's like turning plants into tiny little remediation factories.
In a way, yes. But it's not without its challenges. There are concerns about the safety of releasing engineered organisms, and the scalability of the technology is still being assessed.
That makes sense. It's exciting, but also a little bit scary.
I understand the skepticism, but the potential benefits are huge. Imagine cleaning up contaminated sites without excavation, using a natural self-sustaining system.
That would be incredible.
Yeah.
Okay, let's shift gears to the Save Soil movement. I'm amazed by the sheer number of proclamations we have from mayors around the world. What do you think is driving this groundswell of awareness?
I think people are starting to see the tangible effects of soil degradation in their own communities. Declining crop yields, increased flooding, conflicts over resources. It's no longer an abstract environmental issue. It's hitting close to home.
So those proclamations aren't just symbolic gestures.
Not at all. Many cities are implementing practical solutions. Composting initiatives, urban gardens, changes to building codes to encourage soil-friendly landscaping.
It's encouraging to see this global movement taking root at the local level. It reminds me of the Montreal Protocol, which one of the Save Soil sources mentioned, how the world came together to address the ozone layer crisis. Do you think we could see something similar for soil?
I think it's possible. The Montreal Protocol showed that when faced with a clear and present danger, global cooperation can achieve amazing results.
And the threat posed by soil degradation is arguably just as serious.
Absolutely. We're talking about the potential loss of a vital resource that underpins our entire food system and the stability of our ecosystems.
The numbers are definitely alarming. One source mentions that 52% of agricultural land is already degraded, and that could jump to 95% by 2050.
That's a stark warning, and it highlights the urgency of the situation. We need to act now if we want to avert a global food crisis and prevent further social and environmental upheaval.
This is all incredibly eye-opening. Before this deep dive, I never really gave much thought to soil. It was just dirt. But now I'm seeing it as this intricate, vital web of life that we depend on for so much more than I ever realized.
It's a journey of discovery for sure, and we've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore about this fascinating and essential resource.
I'm ready to dig deeper.
It really is, and it makes you wonder, what can we actually do about all this?
Right. We've talked about these huge solutions like global policies and engineering plans to clean up messes. But are there things that we can do? Everyday people to help.
Absolutely. You don't need a lab or a seat at the UN to make a difference. There are so many practical things you can do right where you are.
Okay, I'm all ears. Give me the rundown. What's at the top of the list?
Well, one of the simplest and most effective things you can do is compost.
Composting. I always wanted to try that. It just seems so sensible. Turning waste into a valuable resource. But is it really as easy as it sounds?
It can be surprisingly easy. You can start with a basic backyard compost pile, or if you're limited on space, you can try a worm bin.
Okay, cool. So composting helps reduce waste, creates natural fertilizer, and improves soil health. What else can we do to be more soil friendly?
Another thing to think about is your lawn care practices. If you have a lawn, consider switching to organic fertilizers and pesticides.
That makes sense. Those chemical treatments probably kill off the good guys along with the bad.
Exactly. Conventional treatments can disrupt the balance of the soil food web, so using natural alternatives is much gentler on the soil ecosystem.
And while we're on the topic of lawns, have you ever thought about reducing the size of yours? Reduce my lawn. Is that like some radical environmentalist move?
Not at all. It's more about recognizing that lawns, while they can be nice to look at, can also be pretty resource intensive. They need a lot of water, fertilizer, and maintenance. So converting a part of your lawn to a native plant garden can actually benefit the soil and support local pollinators and wildlife.
Oh, yeah. I've seen some really beautiful native plant gardens around my neighborhood.
Yeah.
And they always seem to be thriving.
That's because native plants are adapted to the local climate and soil conditions. They need less water and less fuss overall.
It's a win-win. Okay, so we've got composting, organic lawn care, embracing native plants. It's a good list. What else can we add?
Planting trees. Trees are fantastic for soil health. Their roots help prevent erosion, they improve water infiltration, and as their leaves break down, they add organic matter to the soil.
Plus, trees just make everything better. They provide shade, clean the air, and they just look beautiful.
I agree completely. So whether you plant one tree in your yard or get involved in a larger reforestation effort, it's a gift to the soil and to future generations.
Love it. But what about people who live in apartments or don't have yards? Are we just out of luck?
Not at all. You can still support sustainable agriculture by buying from local farmers. Look for farmers markets or CSAs where you can get food directly from people who prioritize soil health.
So we can vote with our dollars and support businesses that align with our values.
Exactly. Consumer choices have a huge impact. When you support businesses and organizations that are committed to soil conservation, you're sending a powerful message.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of individual actions. But what about the bigger picture? How can we influence policy and regulations?
That's a great question. Individual actions are important, but policy changes are crucial for creating lasting systemic change.
So what can we do? Should we write to our elected officials, attend town hall meetings? Or maybe chain ourselves to bulldozers?
Well, maybe skip the bulldozers. But getting involved in the political process is essential. Remember those mayoral proclamations we talked about earlier? Many of those were the result of people advocating for change at the local level. So contact your representatives, attend community meetings, support organizations that are working to advance soil-friendly policies.
I get it. It's about collective action. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by these big issues, but knowing that our voices and our choices can make a difference is really empowering.
I agree. It's not about single-handedly saving the world, it's about contributing to a larger movement.
This deep dive is really highlighting how interconnected everything is. It's like we're all connected like trees in a forest.
Exactly. And just like in a forest, the health of the whole system depends on the health of each tree.
This is profound stuff. But I'm also feeling hopeful. It's not a hopeless situation. We have the knowledge, the tools, and more, it seems like we have the collective will to make a difference.
I share that optimism. I think
Wait,
we're at a turning point. Awareness is growing, and with that comes the potential for real positive change.
so we've explored the what and the why of soil conservation.
Hmm.
And we've talked about a bunch of solutions from individual actions to global policies. What's next?
I think the next step is to go beyond just talking about soil.
What do you mean?
I mean, actually experiencing it, engaging with it directly, using all your senses.
So get out there and get our hands dirty.
Exactly. Visit a local farm or a community garden, take a walk in the woods, or even just dig around in your own backyard.
I do love digging in the dirt.
And pay attention to the texture, the color, the smell of the soil.
Oh yeah, the smell of fresh soil is one of my favorite things.
Yeah. It's amazing how our senses can connect us to the natural world. And while you're exploring, look for those little creatures crawling around. The earthworms, the beetles, the tiny insects. Those are all signs of a healthy soil ecosystem.
So it's about appreciating the complexity of soil, not just intellectually, but on a sensory level too.
Exactly. The more you connect with soil in that way, the more you'll understand its importance.
It's interesting how this theme of connection keeps coming up, both in the science of the soil food web and in the social and political movements that are calling for us to protect soil.
It makes sense, though. Soil is literally the foundation of life. It connects us all.
One of the things that really struck me in these sources was the sense of urgency. It's not just environmentalists who are worried about soil. We have scientists warning about a global food crisis and mayors talking about soil health as a matter of national security.
It's a wake-up call, I think. For too long, we've taken soil for granted, but we're starting to see the consequences of that neglect.
That statistic about soil extinction, costing the world up to US $10.6 trillion annually, that really hit home for me.
It's a staggering number, and that's just the economic costs. The social and environmental costs are much harder to measure, but they're potentially even more devastating.
It's almost too much to think about,
Right.
but we can't afford to ignore it.
I agree. The good news is that it's not too late to act. We have the knowledge and the tools to turn things around.
This deep dive has been both sobering and inspiring. I've learned so much, and I really appreciate you sharing your expertise with us.
It's been my pleasure.
As we wrap up, is there one final thought you'd like to leave our listeners with?
We've talked about technology, policy science, social movements, but I think the most important thing is awareness.
Awareness.
Yeah. For most of human history, our connection to soil was very direct. We were farmers, gardeners, or at least surrounded by nature. But as we've become more urbanized and disconnected from the natural world, I think we've lost touch with that understanding of soil as the source of life.
It's like we've paved over our connection to the earth, literally and figuratively.
Exactly. So my challenge to your listeners is this: cultivate that awareness. Pay attention to the soil around you, learn about its complexities, and share that knowledge with others.
Because the more we understand and appreciate soil, the more likely we are to protect it.
Precisely. Awareness is the seed of change.
Beautifully said. Well, folks, we've dug deep into the world of soil today, and I hope you've come away with a newfound appreciation for this often overlooked, but absolutely essential foundation of life. Remember, every handful of healthy soil is a testament to the incredible web of life on this planet. It's up to all of us to be stewards of this precious resource. Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those questions coming. Until next time, happy digging.